Hello, folks. We've had a couple of minor technical difficulties today, but I hope that I've managed to makeshift my way all the way through it. So today's conversation gets to be about how to leave a conversation. I have been stuck in some fairly crazy situations before at technical networking events, and I've had people ask me before, how do you leave a conversation? Not how do you get into one, but how the hell do you get out of one when someone's just completely stuck to you and you can't remove yourself? Well, to start with a little story, at the last Seattle Tech meetup, I had a very drunk gentleman come up to me, and as I was in the middle of actually interviewing a woman who is a product manager, came up and stuck his beer right in the center of our conversation and said, "Hey ladies, can I run an experiment on you?" At which point I turned to him and said, "No," and then went back to my conversation. He stood there a little dumbfounded, and I said, "We're done here," and then moved on with my conversation. He sort of freaked out a little bit and then walked away. That is very much the beyond nuclear option when someone is clueless, and often you only have to do that when someone is so drunk or so irritating that you just can't get rid of them any other way. Most of the time, however, what you're concerned about is getting away from someone who might be a little socially clueless, and yet at the same time you don't really want to offend them. So I'm going to offer 5 different major solutions that I've come up with to help you get away from conversations that can be a little bit problematic. Don't forget that you can add your questions via the Q&A application that's here in the Hangout, and I will answer them if I see them. Again, I am having a couple of those technical issues. All right, so first one, let's look. Okay, this is my absolute favorite technique. This one is called the compliment. I often use this with people that are very, for some reason they're still talking to me, but I need them, and they are very, very powerful, or I'm in a situation where I very much don't want to offend them. This is what I say. "Oh my gosh, you've given me so much to think about that my brain is completely exploding right now. Thank you so much for this. I actually need to stop talking to you right now so that I can walk away and think about everything you just told me." What this does is it gives the other person a happiness and a feeling of total glow because you have made their day. At the same time, you've ended the conversation in the most polite way possible. It's also true. It's always true when you say that. Remember, as I always say, never ever lie. Never lie when it comes to the conversations that you have, even with people you don't know at a tech meetup someplace. All right, the second technique I'm going to offer you is called the modest dodge. I invented these all up. It's sort of like my game. I know that there are all these fancy names for special kinds of cons that you run on people. I've been watching White Collar lately, and so I invented names for all of these techniques, and now you get to deal with it because it's fun. The second one is called the modest dodge. Here's what I say. "I have taken up so much of your time. I really appreciate it, and I know that you have other people that you have to talk to right now. I'm going to let you get back to that, and I'm going to head over and refresh my drink. Thank you so much. It was great meeting you," or "it was great talking with you again." That right there implies that you know that they have much more to do with their time than only talk to you at this networking event. So there you go. That's a very good one to use as well with someone you know is very busy, because there's no way they can argue the point with you. "No, wait, I'm not that busy. I don't have that much else to do." No one will ever admit that they're not a busy person. So it works like magic. Number 3 is the appointment. This one, we're starting to get into a little bit more dangerous territory. You're going to use this with someone who has been bending your ear, who keeps saying, "Oh wait, no, there's just one more thing I have to tell you." This is something that you use to get out of the conversation by saying something along these lines. "I didn't have a chance to tell you this before we started talking, but my doctor's going to call me in 5 minutes," or "I'm supposed to call my husband in 3 minutes. I'm looking at my phone right now, and in 3 minutes I'm going to have to go." You can also say something like, "I've got a video call that's going to interrupt us. I know something's going to start buzzing on my phone that I set up in advance and have to pick up." What this does is it lets the other person know that before you ever entered into the conversation with them, there was a predetermined end to the conversation and that you have no control over it. You can't stop it. And you say, It was amazing talking with you. Can we follow up on this tomorrow? Maybe you could send me an email. One of the major stories with that one, and the reason that you say, could you just send me an email and we'll continue to follow up tomorrow, is 97% of the time, they're not going to send you an email. If you actually want to follow up with them, say, I'll send you an email. There are variations on this depending on the social cluelessness or cluefulness of the person you're talking to. And offering to follow up in a very specific way, like I'm going to connect with you on LinkedIn, is another good way to get out of this. So that's how to use the appointment, to end the conversation at a predetermined time, letting them know that you're helpless about that, end to the conversation, and saying, here's how we're going to follow up, and that's totally up to you. Number 4 is the switch. This is another favorite one of mine, and I use this sometimes when people are they're very enthusiastic about a topic and they want to continue telling you everything that's amazing and awesome about it. And yet at the same time, you really kind of have the story already. It's time for them to tell someone else how awesome and special they are. So what you do is you eyeball around and look for someone in the room that you know who's genuinely going to be interested in what this person has to say. We'll say that you're talking to Jack right now, and Jack is thrilled about his Arduino project that maps, I don't know, litter in a district in his hometown. That's cool. That's a cool thing. And yet at the same time, once you know what that is, unless you're interested in Arduino or interested in this particular demographic or application he's building, you're pretty much done having that conversation. You might end up in 2 hours back at the bar talking more about it. But at this moment, what you need to do is find a way to get him to talk to someone else. You look around and realize Jamie over there in the corner is into Arduino projects, and you think, this is the good way to get out of this. What you do is you go, hang on for 1 second, Jack. I know somebody who really needs to talk with you right now. You wave and say, Jamie, get her on over here. You're going to introduce the two of them. You say, Jack, I am completely thrilled about the conversation that we're having right now, or whatever variant on that you're going to go with. And say, I know that Jamie is huge into Arduino projects. You guys really need to talk to each other. And I know that her recent project was amazing on Kickstarter, whatever that case might be. And then the second that Jack turns his attention to say hello to Jamie and shakes her hand, whatever that situation is, or reaches out a business card, you look at both of them and say, I am so glad to have made this introduction. If you guys will excuse me, I'm going to run over to the bar and grab myself a new club soda. What that has done is you've let Jack get out of the conversation with you. You've helped him by finding him someone who is genuinely interested in what he has to say. And you've also managed to extricate yourself from a conversation that wasn't really going anywhere for you. And finally, we have more the nuclear option. Be very, very careful with using this one. This is not the ultimate nuclear option. The ultimate nuclear option is, I'm done talking to you, go away now. And I very, very rarely had to use that one, except on people who are really drunk. The nuclear option is so called because it clearly conveys to the other person that you're done talking, but you're allowing them to save face. If you've ever done any study on linguistics, on implicit and explicit communication, you know that allowing another person to save face in the conversation is very important to them. Telling someone, I am glad to have met you, but I don't want to talk to you anymore, is the literal truth. That's not really the way to win friends and influence people. Instead, you still tell the exact truth. You say, I have something that I just remembered that I need to do. That's the literal truth as well. However, for a more socially clued in person, we're talking maybe halfway to where you're at, that lets them know that you're trying to end the conversation while letting them save face. That's why this is a more, deploy this one with care, because you may offend the person that you're talking to, and yet at the same time, you've made it very clear to them that you need to leave the conversation and that they're someone who's holding you back from doing so. This is what you'll often see when someone awkwardly says, oh, my phone is buzzing in my pocket, or, you know, I completely forgot about this appointment that I have. You'll often see their eyes look over to the side because they're trying to get away from you. So if this has happened to you, then someone is telling you that you're talking too much. Maybe have a couple of intro paragraphs and say, if you're interested, we can keep talking, or I can follow up with you later, and that will often work well. So if you're going to tell someone, oh gosh, my phone is buzzing, you pull it out, look at it and go, and you step away, that's a very, very big clue that the other person was talking too much. Okay. Now that I've given you my 5 favorite techniques on how it is that you can get out of these networking conversations if they've become awkward and problematic, let me give you a couple of final tips on how to not be that person. And once that's done, I will answer a couple of the questions that I got via email over the course of the week. I briefly mentioned just now that if you see someone pulling their phone out of their pocket and going, hang on, my phone was buzzing, so sorry, I've got to go, follow up with me by email, okay? That basically means you talked too much, and that's fine. We all get nervous, we all get a little worried. Maybe you had a couple of extra beers, which isn't necessarily always the greatest idea when you're at a networking event. See the sober networking talk that I did a couple of weeks ago. Or you just haven't quite figured out how much information to blast forth at someone on that first meeting. So one of the best ways to do this is make sure that the other person is still asking questions. If the other person is nodding their head and asking questions of you, then you're probably still okay in the conversation. In fact, I would go so far as to say you're always okay if they're still asking you to tell them more. If they have stopped asking you to tell them more about what you're doing, then stop talking, stop telling them what you're doing, because you're reacting to their interest in you to let you know if they want you to continue. And that also works the other way around too. It's a very subtle clue. So, and the reason we're having this conversation is really for folks who don't have any techniques at all to get out of conversations. But if someone stops asking you questions and starts looking to the side, that's a very good clue that they're done talking with you right then. Here's how to get the follow-up that you want. When you're asking someone else for something, then you ask for their business card and say, I will follow up with you. And what that does is it lets that other person know that you've pulled the burden of the continuing contact and conversation onto yourself. So that lets you know how to tell when there's some awkwardness, how to fix that in future, and also how you end up not being that person. My personal flaw was and still is that I interrupt people and I don't ask them quite enough questions about themselves. I'm working really hard on that. So one of the greatest ways that you can be that great conversationalist that someone's not trying to get away from is to start asking them questions about their situation. If they're answering questions from you and they're telling you about their projects, their life, their company, and yet as you're doing so, you still see them looking around trying to get out of the conversation, it's possible they genuinely do have other stuff they need to get doing. Graciously let them out of the conversation, and at a bare minimum, make sure that they have your card. What that'll do is it'll tell them that you understand that they've got stuff they've got to do, and that you're giving them the opportunity to follow up with you if you want to. So that's a really helpful way to handle the social issues at a tech meetup and any other networking you might be at. In fact, basically those are the 5 techniques I use to get out of any conversation I don't really want to be in right then. That is not to say that the people that I'm talking to are not interesting and don't have fascinating projects. It's often more that in a meetup or a networking event that lasts for about 90 minutes and at which there are 200 people, I have maybe 40 to 45 seconds to have a conversation with people. Acknowledging that I'm not going to be able to hit everyone means that I can get that conversation up to 1 or 2 minutes a person and try to get business cards or reach out again in future. So that is the best advice I can give you on how to not offend people and yet at the same time try to maximize your conversational space that you've got at networking events. All right, I've got a couple of questions from folks this week, and the major conversation question that I received was, how do I know when I'm the one who's being that kind of a pain in the ass? Like I mentioned, you'll see their eyes looking from side to side. That's what someone does when they're scanning the room and trying to figure out who they can move to next or what it is they need to do next. Just paying attention to that one thing will make a huge difference for you. In addition, make sure not just that they haven't stopped asking questions about your project, but that you too are asking questions about theirs. The biggest issue that I see among folks is I see especially new people to networking, and new people who haven't quite figured out yet how much information to get across, try to do the fastest brain dump of information at a senior person in technology possible. And you'll see people blinking and kind of moving their head back a little bit as they're getting this onslaught of information. Once they get that onslaught of information, they're often overwhelmed. That, by the way, is the perfect time to use that compliment technique that I gave you at first, if this happens to you. Just to say to the person, that was a huge amount of information, you've blown my mind, I love it, let's follow up later. The other side of that is maybe try your approach with someone that you trust in advance and see how much information is really necessary to get across. Really, all you need to do is let the other person know that you're a decent person who's smart, who has a cool project they're working on, and you'd love to tell them more later. You can get all of that across in 10 to 20 seconds without necessarily giving them a brain dump. I had someone pop up with a suggestion on something to talk about, and that was on creepy eye contact, which I absolutely adore. The creepy eye contact issue is, how do you tell when you're making enough or not enough eye contact? This is something that you can practice. You can very deliberately practice. And some folks who've spent a lot of time in technology are, they've spent a lot of time behind a computer screen and not as much interacting with people. Maintaining that deathlock eye contact on someone can be very uncomfortable. And you can see those signals that the person gives, like moving their eyes from side to side, or moving their eyes up and down from maybe your name badge to your face, up to the ceiling, if something like that is happening. If you are doing that, realize that somewhere around the optimal amount of direct eye contact to make with the other person is only about 50 to 60% of the conversation that you're having. A lot of other times you'll want to look down at your hands as you're gesturing. You'll want to look at the other person, make a comment, point to someone else. As you're telling a story, throw your eyes up to the ceiling a little. And what that does is it lets the other person take a deep breath and re-enter the conversation with you without feeling like you're trying to win some kind of staring contest. Don't end up being the person who puts someone else in a staring contest. It's not necessarily that they'll realize what happened or that you did, just that they'll know that they feel a little uncomfortable around you. There are a lot of networking and advice columns and educational resources on the internet to help people who are learning more social skills. Often there are folks who have some social or anxiety disorders that need help with this. And I'd advise you to go take a look at the documentation, the stories, the blogs that are out there. In fact, if you see me talking with you here on the internet right now, you'll actually see me looking away, looking at my hands, because I'm talking directly to you. If you were to count up the amount of time that I'm directly staring at the camera, it's really not going to be even close to 100% of the time. Try to use the amount of information that I'm presenting here as far as my eye contact is concerned as an example too. You can also go back and take a look at other videos that I've done and realize that I'm going to be actually even doing a little bit too much eye contact with the video screen right now. And yet, just like you see this right now as I'm looking away to the side, you can see how to make someone feel like you're thinking about their words and that you'll glance back up at them and then glance back down or up or around at the people around you to let them take that deep breath. I have, I think, one final question today. And my last question, body contact and body conversations, the space that you have in between another person. How do you handle it when a person is talking with you and they keep inching towards you in space? So this is something that can be different from culture to culture, from coast to coast. On the east coast of the United States, people tend to have much closer distance when they're talking to one another. On the West Coast, you'll find that people have 3-4 feet in between them easily. This is not just cultural. I think it has to do with the way our cities are designed, with the way that we interact with one another. So how do you handle it when someone keeps approaching your personal space? The first and easiest way to handle it is angle your body a little bit. Put one foot behind the other and get a closer to angled approach to the conversation. This opens out the space that you have to either side without making you feel like you need to keep backing up. As a result, when the person starts walking more or inching more towards you, you step to the side. Continue to step to the side and break the line between you. Ever done any martial arts? That's exactly what this is. Step off the line and inch around. You're not letting them push you back. Instead, you're making them walk in a circle. I've had this happen before, and it is hysterical to watch people walk in a circle as they keep trying to get into my personal space. They're just clueless. But if you, instead of thinking of it as a threat, think of it as more like a dance or one of the games we play with ourselves in long car rides or at social events that are uncomfortable. See if you can get them to do a full circle around you. It'll crack you up. Then you'll feel less uncomfortable and be better able to relate to them as a person. Your second option is to put something physically between you. And that is when you can do something like say, let's head on over to the buffet table and make sure that they're on one side and you're on the other. Stand there on the other side of the table so that they realize they're forced to realize that they can't get any closer to you. And your final option is if you actually have someone who is deliberately approaching and pushing into your space. That is a point where it is not just okay, but please do tell them, you need to realize that you're too close in my personal space. Please step back. This is confrontational, and I recognize that a lot of folks are going to have some problems with this. If you have a problem with this and you think that someone is deliberately trying to push into your space to intimidate or harass you, you need to contact whoever is in charge of that event. If you're the person in charge of that event, get that person out of that event. It's your job to make people feel safe there. Tell them they need to leave. And after a while, you'll find that people will learn their lesson when it comes to pushing into someone else's space inappropriately. I hope that this helped and that you had an opportunity to ask all the questions you wanted to. You can always email me or tweet me. Go ahead and follow me at @Tara on Twitter, and you'll find that just about anywhere on my website. I look forward to speaking to you folks very soon, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.